Welcome back to the second lesson of slide guitar. I hope you managed that last little exercise of sliding those notes and producing some really nice dampened and exciting tones. Now in this lesson we're going to continue looking at some more essential things like vibrato and how to use the right hand properly when dampening certain strings. Now if you recall, we left off with me suggesting that you practice sliding one note and then two notes and then three notes like that. Now I just want to mention that generally with slide, although you put the slide over all the strings in a lot of cases where you're playing full chords or you're playing certain notes on the bass strings, when you're playing, for example, say the first and second string or just the first string, only use just about as much of the slide as you want. If you know your intentions are to only play the first and second string or just the first string, then only use as much of the slide as you need. That way you don't have to worry about all these extra notes being sounded because your slide happens to be covering strings that aren't actually being played. So that's an important point as well to mention. So once again, if you're using the slide for the notes that are higher up on the first, second or third string, just cover the amount of strings with the slide that you actually need, not the entire set of strings. Well, we're moving right along and we're going to start getting into some interesting areas where we're going to be playing some really cool bluesy slide licks. Before we do that, I have just a few more technical details that are very important to iron out with you. Let's take a look at these. Now, you may have noticed when I played earlier from the 5th fret to the 7th, I may have put in a little bit of what's called vibrato, like that. And vibrato, like in other forms of guitar, like classical guitar or blues guitar, involves making the string have a little bit more of a singing character by using different techniques to it. In classical guitar, of course, you put your finger behind the fret and you move your wrist and fingertip lengthwise in this direction to produce a singing tone. In blues, if you recall, if you ever did the blues course, in leads, you put your fingers this way and you push the string up slightly out of tune and back again. Now with slide, it's closer to the classical vibrato, but unlike the classical where the fingertip presses behind the fret, the slide goes to the top of the fret and then it moves, again, parallel to the fret, like I emphasized in the first lesson. It moves back and forth, just slightly behind the fret, or slightly in front of the fret, front going this way, and it moves like that to produce a lovely singing tone. There it is with the chord. And of course, most of the movement is also coming from the forearm, and the thumb is supporting the hand by placing it at the back of the neck. And you just practice sliding up. It can be one string. When you get there, you can sort of move up to pitch, that is where the slide is directly above the fret, and you can move it back slightly behind, or you can move it slightly forward, but either way, whichever motion you move behind or in front of the fret, it evens out, so the main note you're hearing is really the note that's being pitched on top of the fret, like that. Again. Of course, you can do slow vibratos or quicker ones for effect. And of course, you can do this on all the strings as well. Now, this is probably the hardest technical issue to deal with of all in these first stages, and that is what to do with the right hand, whether to use a pick or whether to use your thumb and fingers. Now, the problem is this. Most people want to use a pick because they're used to using one. But essentially, the best dampening of the strings that you're going to need to do can be done with the thumb and fingers. Now, I'm going to show you the right hand and give you some alternative suggestions here. Now I'm holding a pick with my right hand, albeit a tiny little red pick, and my left hand is around with the slide at the 12th fret, around there. Now there's some single notes you can play around here, and if I just use the pick as you would normally play an electric guitar, you'll find if I play these notes, you hear all these extra, or presumably the correct word is extraneous sounds that you don't really need. Like that. And it's very hard to be selective and dampen out the strings when you're using a pick in the traditional way that the pick is used with electric guitar. Now, if you're not used to using your thumb and fingers, you can actually do some muting by placing the thumb on the strings. Now, we covered some of these techniques in the lead guitar course. Now, in this case, you would mute, let's say, all the strings except the first string, which you're going to use with the pick. So now if you play, although you're sliding, you're only hearing really the first string. And then each time I play, my thumb sits back on these strings to mute them out. Like that. Now that's one option of trying to play with the pick, but you have to be extremely careful that you place your thumb on the strings to avoid that kind of sound. So we have that's what we don't want. And that's a little bit better. Now, here's my thumb and fingers in a typical classical guitar style pose or position, where I can use them individually, the thumb and the fingers. Now, for certain types of playing, although you may not be used to this, you do get a little bit more control over dampening than you otherwise would if you're using a pick. Now I'm going to take a particular slide, typical blues slide phrase here, and I'll play it to you. Now I'm basically muting. It's between the thumb on the second string and my index finger or middle finger, doesn't really matter which, on the first string. So I'm starting off hitting the second string at the 12th fret, and then I hit the first string, and then I slide back to the 11th fret on the first string, like that. So I'm going. Now, without any dampening, you can hear the second string being sounded as I slide back, like that. So although I'm going here, and then here, the slide is dragging the tones of the second string back. Now, with this muting technique, what you would do is you'd put your thumb on the second string to start the phrase off, so you hit it here, and then as you hit the first string, let's say with your first or index finger, as you slide back, the thumb quickly comes down and dampens or mutes the second string, so you have like that. Like that. See how quick the thumb quickly goes over to the second string and dampens it down. As soon as the slide is beginning, now, having shown you the right hand dampening technique with the thumb and fingers, it is very, very hard to do. However, if you want to play some really, really advanced slide and do some of the muting techniques with the thumb and fingers, you're going to have to start to develop that style of playing. However, if all you want to do is some basic elementary slide to intermediate level, then you can use a pick. So I'll leave that up to you, but I would urge you to work on using your thumb and fingers if you have the patience and the time to develop it. Now, we're going to take a look at some very cool sounding rhythms which we can play with the left hand.